They say family shows up when it matters most. But when I woke up in a hospital bed after a heart attack, one of my children never came. And the reason why, it changed how I see my own son forever.
I arrived at my house and found all my things on the lawn. My daughter-in-law appeared and said, "We decided to do a clean-out. Those old things are useless now." I looked her in the eyes and answered calmly, "Then I'm also going to clean out what's no longer useful to me." I took out my phone. It was time to show who really calls the shots here. I will never forget that moment, that precise instant when my life split in two. I had just returned from Phoenix. I had buried my younger sister, Grace, after watching her suffer for 6 months with cancer. I was still wearing the black funeral dress, stuck to my skin. I could still smell the damp earth and withered flowers. I could still hear my nephews' cries as they said goodbye to their mother. I came back devastated. I came back with a broken soul. I came back needing a hug, a cup of hot tea, a kind word from my son Robert. But what I found was silence. I opened the gate to my house. Well, to the house. That two-story house with a garden in the front that I bought myself after working for 40 years, cleaning offices. That house I painted pale yellow because I always dreamed of a cheerful home. That house I gave to my son 3 years ago when he married Danielle, because a mother always wants to see her children established. And there they were. All my things, thrown on the lawn as if they were trash. My clothes, my shoes, the photographs of my late husband, the hand-knitted shawl my grandmother gave me before she died, my children's records from when they were babies. Everything, absolutely everything, piled up next to the bougainvillea plants that I had planted myself. I stood paralyzed. My purse fell from my hands. "What?" I whispered, feeling the air leave my chest. And then she appeared. Danielle came out of my house with a smile on her face. She was wearing a new dress, the kind that costs at least $300. Her hair was freshly styled, her nails perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked as if she had just left a beauty salon, while I had just come from burying my sister. "Oh, Mum, it's so good you're back," she said in that sweet, fake voice she always used with me. "We decided to do a deep clean of the house. You know, all those old things took up so much space and, well, they're useless now." I stared at her. My hands were shaking. "Old things," I repeated slowly. "Danielle, those are my belongings. There are my children's photo albums, my personal documents, the clothes of—" "Oh, yes, I know," she interrupted me with a wave of her hand, as if shooing a fly. "But we needed the space in your room. We're going to turn it into the baby's room." "Didn't Robert tell you? I'm 3 months pregnant." I felt a punch in my stomach. Pregnant? And I was finding out like this, after my things were thrown out onto the street? "Danielle, I need to talk to Robert," I managed to say, though my voice was cracking. "He's at work, Mum. He gets home late, but don't worry. We left a little spot for you. Come on, I'll show you." She took my arm with that feigned familiarity that irritated me so much. She led me to the back of the house, to the small utility room we used to store tools and bags of cement. She opened the door. "Ta-da, you can stay here. We cleaned it up a bit, put in a folding bed. It's tiny, but it's enough. But we do need you to be discreet. You know, with the baby on the way, we don't want any stress or people getting in the way." I looked at that room. It was no more than 6 feet by 6 feet. It smelled of dampness. The only window faced a dark alley. The folding bed had a thin, stained mattress. Something inside me broke. But something else. Something deeper. It ignited. I looked her in the eyes, Danielle was still smiling, expecting me to bow my head, to accept, to say thank you for leaving me a corner in the house that I bought. Instead, I took a deep breath. "You know what, Danielle?" I said, with a calmness I didn't know I had. "You're right. It's time for a clean out, a deep clean out, of everything that no longer serves me." Her smile faltered for just a second. I took my cell phone out of my pocket. I looked for a number I had saved for years. Mr. Mendez, my lawyer. "What are you doing?" Danielle asked, the fake sweetness gone from her voice. "Cleaning up," I replied. "Exactly what you suggested." I dialed the number. I listened to the ringing tone, and as I waited for them to answer, I looked Danielle straight in the eyes. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't look away, because in that moment I understood something. I had given that house out of love, but I had never, ever given away my dignity. And they were about to find out who really called the shots here. If you want to know how a woman who lost everything reclaimed her power, subscribe to this channel, because this story is just beginning. And what comes next, nobody expects. Mr. Mendez answered on the third ring. "Carol, what happened?" His voice sounded worried. He knew I had just buried my sister. "Mr. Mendez, I need to see you tomorrow morning. It's urgent," I said, without taking my eyes off Danielle. She had completely lost that fake smile. Now she was looking at me with narrowed eyes, calculating, dangerous. "Are you okay?" asked the lawyer. "No, but I'm going to be," I replied, and hung up. Danielle crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're planning, Mum, but I'll remind you that this house belongs to Robert, and I'm his wife, so if you want to stay here, you're going to have to follow our rules." I clenched my teeth. I wanted to scream at her that I had bought that house with the sweat of 40 years cleaning other people's bathrooms, that every brick in those walls carried my sacrifice, that Robert was barely 25 years old when I gave it to him, without asking for a single dollar in return. But I said nothing, because I had learned something in my 67 years of life. Words without power are just noise, and I needed to get my power back first. "Okay," I said simply. "I'll stay in the utility room." Danielle blinked, surprised. I think she expected a fight, expected drama, expected me to cry or beg. "Oh, good. I'm glad you understand," she said, regaining some of her composure. "And another thing, there's no more room in the refrigerator for your things, so you'll have to buy your own food and keep it in your room. We can't be sharing the kitchen at all hours either. The doctor says I need to avoid stress." I nodded slowly. "Of course, no problem." "Perfect. Well then, welcome to your new space," she said, and went inside the house, swaying her hips as if she had just won a battle. I was left alone in that tiny room. I closed the door. And then, only then, did I allow myself to cry. I cried for my sister Grace. I cried for my husband, who had been dead for 10 years. I cried for the woman I had been, strong, hard-working, proud. I cried for my son Robert, who once hugged me and told me, "Mum, you're my hero." When had everything changed? I sat on that folding bed that smelled musty. I looked around. The walls had damp stains. The light bulb hung from a bare wire. There wasn't even a nail to hang clothes on. But then I remembered something. I remembered my mother, who had raised 5 children alone after my father abandoned us. I remembered how she would tell us, "Daughters, a woman isn't strong because of what she has. She is strong because of what she is capable of rebuilding when everything is taken from her." I wiped my tears. I took out my cell phone and started taking pictures of the room, of my belongings thrown on the lawn, of everything. because if life had taught me anything, it's that the truth always needs proof. That night, Robert arrived after 11 o'clock. I heard his car park. I heard voices. I heard Danielle's sharp laugh. I waited. I thought he would come to see me, that he would knock on the utility room door, that he would ask me how I was after my sister's funeral. But he didn't come. At 12 o'clock at night, when I couldn't take it anymore, I left the room. I walked barefoot down the hallway of my house, feeling the cold tiles under my feet. I knocked on the master bedroom door. "Robert?" I called softly. Silence. "Robert, son, I need to talk to you." The door opened just a crack. My son peeked his head out. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, thinner than the last time I had seen him. "Mom, it's late," he whispered. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" I repeated, feeling my voice break. "Robert, they threw all my things on the lawn. They put me in the utility room, and you didn't even tell me Danielle is pregnant." He looked down. "Mum, I was going to tell you, but you were in Phoenix with Aunt Gracie and I just buried my sister, Robert. I just said goodbye to the only family I had left from my generation, and I come home to find I've been treated like trash." "It's not personal, Mum," he said, rubbing his eyes. "We just need the space. With the baby on the way, things have to change." "Change?" I looked at him in disbelief. "Robert, I bought this house. I gave it to you because I thought you would want me here, that we would be a family. And we are, Mum. But Danielle, she's stressed. The pregnancy has been difficult. The doctor says we shouldn't upset her." "And me?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. "Don't I matter?" Robert sighed. "Of course you matter, Mum. But you have to understand. Danielle is my family now, my priority. You always told us yourself that when you get married, your wife comes first." Every word was like a stab. "Not like this, son," I whispered. "Not like this." "Mum, please. We're tired. We'll talk tomorrow, okay? Try to be understanding." And he closed the door. I stood in that hallway, trembling. My son, my Robert, the boy whose diapers I changed, whom I taught to read, whom I hugged every time he cried. That son had just closed the door in my face. I returned to the utility room like a ghost, but I didn't cry anymore, because something inside me had changed. The sadness was turning into something else, into determination, into silent fury, into the absolute certainty that this could not be left like this. I sat on that folding bed and opened my nightstand drawer. In there, I kept something no one knew I had. An old notebook where I kept a record of all the house expenses since I had given it to Robert. I started to turn the pages, and what I saw froze my blood. But it also gave me the first weapon I needed to fight. What I discovered that night changed everything, and the worst part is they had no idea what was coming. The notebook trembled in my hands. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. The utility room was completely silent. The only sound was the dripping of a leaky faucet somewhere in the house. I turned the pages slowly, feeling my heart beat faster with every line I read. I had always been organized with money. I had to be. When you grow up poor, you learn that every dollar counts. So when I gave the house to Robert, I asked him for something very simple. "Son, I just want you to keep me updated on the important expenses. Not to control you, but because this house is your asset, and assets need to be taken care of." He had agreed. During the first year, Robert would show me the receipts, tell me about the repairs. We were a team. But since he married Danielle, everything had changed. I looked at the numbers again, feeling the blood rush to my head. In the last 8 months, Huge transfers had been made from the family bank account. I had access to the bank statements because Robert had given me a debit card for emergencies, but I had never used it. I only checked the transactions occasionally. And now, seeing it all together, the reality hit me like a punch. $4,500 in January. Living room remodel. $5,200 in February. New furniture. $3,800 in March. No description. $6,100 in April. Trip to Miami. $4,800 in May. Various purchases. $5,400 in June. Decoration. $7,300 in July. No description. $7,900 in August. Baby expenses. I added it up mentally. It was hard because my hands were trembling so much I could barely hold the pencil. $45,000. Almost $500,000 in 8 months. Where had that money come from? Robert earned a good salary as an engineer, about $3,500 a month, but after paying for utilities, food and gas, there wasn't that much left over. Definitely not enough to spend more than $5,000 a month on extras. Then I remembered something that froze my blood. When I gave the house to Robert, I also left him access to a savings account I had maintained for years. It was money from my severance package when I retired, plus some savings I had put together. Almost $60,000. I told him, son, this is for emergencies, so you'll never lack anything. With trembling hands, I searched through my papers until I found the last statement for that savings account. I opened it, and my world collapsed. Current balance, $8,954. Out of $60,000, only $8,900 remained. I felt the room spin. I had to sit on the floor, leaning against the damp wall, trying to breathe. More than $50,000. Gone. In less than a year. And I had no idea because I was busy taking care of my sick sister in Phoenix. Because I trusted my son. Because I never, ever thought they would do something like this to me. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they had used me. They had kicked me out of my house. They had taken my space. They had humiliated me. With the very money I had given them. I got up from the floor. My legs were shaking, but I walked to the room's window. Outside, in the dark alley, I could see the light from the neighbour's kitchen. Ms. Lucy. She always woke up early to make biscuits and sell them before dawn. She was an older woman like me, a widow like me, a woman who had worked her whole life to raise her children. And in that moment, I needed to talk to someone. I put on a robe over my nightgown and slipped quietly out of the house. I walked the 20 yards that separated my house from hers. I knocked gently on her kitchen door. "Who is it?" Miss Lucy's voice asked. "It's me, Lucy. Carol." The door opened immediately. Miss Lucy looked at me with concern. She knew I had just returned from the funeral. "Honey, what are you doing up at this hour? Come in. Come in." I entered her small, warm kitchen. It smelled of fresh dough, a hot griddle, freshly brewed coffee. It smelled like home, what my house used to smell like. "Coffee?" she offered, pouring me a cup without waiting for an answer. I sat at her old, worn wooden table, and then I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears started to fall. "Lucy," I whispered, "I need you to tell me the truth. Have you seen anything strange at my house these past months?" She sat across from me, taking my hands in hers, rough and calloused from work. "Honey, I didn't want to say anything because you were with your sick sister. But yes, I've seen things." "What things?" Miss Lucy sighed deeply. "Your daughter-in-law, Danielle, she doesn't work, right?" "No, Robert says she doesn't need to work, that he earns enough. Well, honey, that girl changes cars every 2 weeks. It's not the same one. I've seen a red car, a white one, a grey one, and the bags she takes out of the car are from those expensive stores at the mall, the ones that cost thousands of dollars. I felt a chill. And Robert? I see your son leave very early and come back very late. He looks tired, honey. Very tired. And thin, like he's not eating well. Anything else? Miss Lucy hesitated. Then she spoke in a lower voice, like someone sharing a painful secret. The other day, I saw them sell your furniture. The old ones. The ones you had in the living room. The carved wood ones. Some guys came in a truck and took them away. Your daughter-in-law was there, smiling, counting bills. The coffee cup fell from my hands. It shattered on the floor. That furniture. That damned furniture. It was my mother's inheritance. Furniture that was over 70 years old. Furniture my grandmother had brought from Philadelphia when she moved to the city. Furniture that was worth a fortune. Not because of the money, but because of the history. And Danielle had sold it, as if it were trash. How long ago was that? I asked in a dead voice. 2 weeks ago, honey, when you were in Phoenix. I remained silent. Miss Lucy got up to sweep the broken pieces of the cup, but I barely heard her. In my head, the pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. The missing money, the excessive spending, the sold furniture, my clothes thrown on the lawn, the utility room. Danielle wasn't just kicking me out of the house. She was erasing me. Erasing my history, my memories, my existence. And my son was letting her do it. I returned to the utility room as dawn was breaking. I sat on that folding bed with the bank statements and my notebook on my lap. And I made a decision. If they wanted to play this way, I would play too. But by my own rules. Because they didn't know something very important. They didn't know that the house was still in my name. Robert had never done the official paperwork to change the owner. I had only given him verbal permission to use it. They didn't know that I had documents for absolutely everything. And they didn't know that the woman sitting in that miserable room was not the same one who had arrived yesterday. That woman had been broken. But from the ashes, something new was being born, something stronger, something dangerous. When the sun had fully risen, I already had a plan. And I swear, not even in their worst nightmares could they imagine what I was about to do to them. At 9 o'clock in the morning sharp, I was knocking on the door of Mr. Mendez's office. I had washed up in the utility sink in the yard because Danielle had locked the door to the main bathroom so I wouldn't use her hot water. I had put on my best black dress, the same one from the funeral. I had styled my hair carefully, pulling it back into a firm bun, because I had learned something over all these years. When you go to fight for what's yours, you have to look dignified. Mr. Mendez greeted me with a long, tight hug. Carol, my dear, I'm so sorry about your sister. Gracie was a great woman. Thank you, Mr. Mendez, I said, feeling the lump in my throat. But I didn't come to talk about that. I came for something else. We sat in his office, filled with books and diplomas. He poured me a glass of water and waited patiently for me to begin. I took out my notebook, the bank statements, the pictures of my things on the lawn, everything. And I told him. Everything. As I spoke, I watched Mr. Mendez's face transform, from concern to surprise, from surprise to indignation. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. Carol, this is serious, very serious. I know. Does your son know you have access to those bank statements? He gave me the card years ago, but I think he forgot. I never used it. The lawyer nodded slowly, thinking. All right. Let's take this one step at a time. First, the house. Do you have the deed? Yes, here it is. I took the document out of my bag. I had guarded it like a treasure. He reviewed it carefully, turning each page with professional attention. And then he smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of a strategist. Carol, do you know what we have here? What? The deed is still 100% in your name. Robert never made the official change of ownership with a notary public. I felt my heart skip a beat, but I gave it to him as a gift. Yes, but legally a gift of real estate requires a formal act before a notary. You gave him permission to live there. You gave him what we call in law a tenancy at will. Basically, you lent him the house. But the house is still yours. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. So that means what? That means you can revoke that permission whenever you want. It's your property. They are, legally speaking, your tenants, without a contract, without permanent possession rights. I remained silent, processing that information. And the money? I asked. The $45,000 that disappeared. The lawyer reviewed the bank statements with a serious expression. There's something very interesting here. Look at these transfers. Many were made with an electronic signature. Did you authorize these transactions? No, never. And Robert has full access to the account? Yes, because I gave it to him when I lent him the house. I wanted him to have a financial backup. But did you sign any document making him a co-owner of the account? I thought carefully. No, he just has a linked debit card, but the account is in my name. Mr. Mendez clasped his hands on the desk. Carol, this is delicate. If Robert made those transfers without your explicit authorization, it could be considered misappropriation of assets. Technically, it's family fraud. The words fell on me like stones. Fraud. My own son. I don't want to send him to jail, Mr. Mendez, I said quickly. I just want things to be fair. And they will be. But you need to regain your negotiating power. And for that, we need to make some moves. He took out a notepad and began to write. Here's what we're going to do. First, today we are going to change all the passwords to your bank accounts. You will be the only one with access. I nodded. Second, we're going to make an official inventory of everything that was in that house when you gave it to Robert, including that antique furniture they sold. You are going to formally report the unauthorized sale of your property. Can I do that? Of course you can, because you never took your name off the deed. Legally, everything in that house was still yours. I felt the strength return to my body. Third, we are going to formally notify Robert that he must vacate the property in 30 days, or alternatively, sign a formal lease agreement with monthly rent and very clear clauses. Rent? I asked, surprised. To my own son? The lawyer looked at me with those wise eyes that had seen 1,000 cases like mine. Carol, your son kicked you out of your house, put you in a utility room, spent your money without asking, sold your mother's furniture. Do you really think he deserves to continue living there for free? He was right. Completely right. And if he refuses, I asked, then we start the eviction process. And believe me, with the evidence you have, a judge will rule in your favor in less than 3 months. I stared out the office window. Outside, Chicago was bustling with its normal traffic. People going to work, street vendors, everyday life. And there I was, about to completely change the course of my life. Is there anything else? The lawyer said, pulling me from my thoughts. Do you have other assets, properties, accounts? I thought carefully. Yes, I have a small apartment in the old factory district. It was my husband's. We've been renting it out for years. How much do you rent it for? $1,800 a month. And where does that money go? To a different bank account, one I opened years ago for the apartment's maintenance expenses. Robert doesn't know about that account. Mr. Mendez smiled broadly.
I thought the heart attack was the worst thing that could happen. But what I discovered about my daughter-in-law next would shock me, break my son, and nearly destroy our family. Don't miss the next part. You won't believe what she did.